So I wanted to make a companion video to the video I recently made called Exploring Sound. This video will be called Exploring Sensation. So what I want to do is make a contrast between the experience of all-encompassing sound sensation, or the fullness or everything aspect of sound, uh, and compare that to the experience of sensation in the body. So obviously sensation can mean a category of all the senses. So it can be a collection of sight, sound, taste, touch. That's not what I mean by sensation in this sense. What I mean is physical body sensation. So the experience of physical touch and the experience of internal sensations in the body. So we're going to explore that sensation in the same way that we did with sound. And I'm going to point out some nuances and some sticking points that tend to come up. This is partially, this video came about by discussing this exact topic with two different people today, and some of their questions surrounding the physical sense when they're doing direct exploration of senses, with the intent to clarify the all-encompassing nature of sense experience or of sense phenomenon. This is described as the sense sensing itself, or self-sensing. So color sees, or seeing sees, sound hears, sensation feels, feeling feels. This all-encompassing, vivid, filling up all of experience side of the phenomenon, the phenomenon of experience, of sensation. So to begin, I think we'll just start with sound again and tune in a little bit. I think of the three most common sense modalities that you will investigate in this way, sound is probably the most easily accessible. Probably because it tends to have a sort of not as locatable nature as visual sense. Visual sense is very tightly linked to a body map. So when we see something out front, we immediately put the context of location onto that sense object. It's pretty tightly interwoven. And then with body sense, I think it's variable. There are times when it's more, a little more oceanic, more non-locatable, and neither inside or outside, or both inside and outside. There are times when it has that aspect. And then there are times, I think, with contraction, intense emotional experiences, where the body sense is actually very local, very stuck feeling, very centered in a certain body center, and there's a lot of resistance around it. So I think the physical sense varies based on different conditions. So starting with sound is often very, very easy and accessible. You can actually do it when you're awake, walking around in the world, doing your day-to-day tasks, or if you just have a few moments to sit quietly. And it's certainly very accessible when you deliberately sit to meditate, spend time in silence. So it's best to start with just a few moments of relaxation, of becoming present to the surroundings, to what's going on inside the body, to what's going on inside the mind. Just letting attention start to scan the body, scan the environment, sense by sense, what is seen, what is heard, what is felt, and then just sort of start to relax into the present, into the moment. Kind of set down our agendas, not worry too much about what's going to happen in the next hour or what's happened in the last hour. We can put that aside and worry about it later, think about it later, contemplate it later if we want to. But for now, let's just come into the present as best we can without forcing anything, just becoming receptive. And we can turn our attention to the sound aspect, to the sound portion of our experience. So are there any loud sounds in the room? Anything that immediately catches your attention? The voice, obviously. maybe the sound or hum of an electrical appliance, a computer, an air conditioner, a heater, a laptop. Maybe a very faint, high-pitched sound coming from some kind of a screen, electrical device. Maybe some sounds outside you're hearing through the wall or window. Maybe some sounds through the walls, other parts of the home or the apartment. So we just kind of let the attention scan the sounds, move around a bit. Look for the loud sounds, look for the quiet sounds. And start to let that attention actually relax, dilate out, so that it's not so directed like a narrow beam or narrow cone of attention. It's more of a dilated attention, just very receptive. You might start to experience how it can just sort of take in all the sounds at once, not picking and choosing, not looking for the right sound or the wrong sound, not filtering, just totally absorbing into the sound cloud. All the hums and clicks and voice, and wherever attention moves, however it moves, is very intuitive. As you do this, you might notice a ringing in the ears. It's there all the time, actually. The mind filters out unnecessary information, which probably pretty helpful a lot of times, but when we're sitting with this relaxed attention, this undirected attention, this receptive posture, then that hum starts to become obvious, that ringing. If you notice, it's actually pretty loud. It tends to be louder than ambient sounds often. If you really just let your attention move right into it, saturate into it, let it saturate your field of awareness. You might notice that ringing or hum is pretty loud. It's not disturbing, but as it makes itself known, you might notice it's as loud as some of the ambient sounds in the room, maybe somewhat louder. May not be as loud as the voice. But all that sound, those individual sounds, without trying to pick out an individual sound, they start to blend, overlap. See if you can find that. You find it not by directing your attention, but by relaxing your attention more. You might be able to notice that the sounds start to overlap, the hum of the ringing in the ears and the hum of appliances or sounds outside start to just feel like the same cloud. Maybe different movements in one cloud of sound. And then we just relax into that sound. Let go of any sense of a listener. Just the sound, just the direct experience. Nothing's left out. No part of our cloud of experience is empty if sound fills it all up. There's no inside and outside to the sound. There's no beginning or end to it. There's no descriptors. Just self-radiant. Self-obvious. Location is everywhere. It just completely fills up experience. You just lean into it with a very relaxed attention. It's like a very natural curiosity, enjoyment. That's the aspect of all-encompassing nature of sound. It might feel like almost like it's vibrating, scintillating, pulsating, very vibrant. Completely free, moving on its own, undirected. very clear sound. So in the same sort of cascade of observations, we're going to move that attention into the body. It can be helpful in the body to start with sort of a scan of the feet. In the same way you were sort of making yourself receptive to sound, now you make yourself receptive to body sensation, just the sensation in the feet. Once attention moves there, you can drop the visual image of the feet. You don't need to imagine feet, just that experience, just this feel of that sense cloud in the feet. And the knees, same thing. Just a relaxed attention, subtly directed to the knees, to the thighs. To the belly. To the chest. The sensation of the chest moving, the breath moving within the chest. The neck or throat. You might notice if there's a little tightness in any of these spaces, tension might move there and then relax a bit. Any tension in the head, any sensation in the head, behind the eyes, top of the head, back of the head. Just be receptive to the sensation without a label. Anywhere else we've missed, the hands, the arms, shoulders, back. So it can help with the body to scan a bit. And we did this with sound, really. We purposely looked for the loud sounds, the quiet sounds, the ambient sounds, the hearing, the buzz of the ears, the sort of physiologic sounds. We kind of looked through all of those, and then we relaxed. Just invited them all in, similar to the body sensations. You invite them. Sorry, my eye's a bit itchy right now. Watering a bit. So similarly, it can help to just remind yourself of the spaces in the body as far as direct experience of sensation. We tend to sometimes hold attention out of certain areas or in certain areas of the body. And certain parts of the body might be clenched or tensed in the hands, the feet, the jaw, any of those. So it helps to just sort of scan the areas. And then if you can, just let the tension relax a little more into the kind of the whole space of the body. You don't have to picture the body, but just start with one center, the feet or the gut, the belly, chest. Just kind of let it relax from that center. See where it goes. Notice the edges get fuzzy. And at some point, this may or may not be happening for you right now, but at some point, you'll be intuitively aware in the same way that you can be intuitively aware, clearly aware that you're not missing any sound, and that whole sort of sound cloud is you're immersed in it and it's immersed in your awareness. The same thing can happen with the body sensations, although I think it's a little less intuitive. Maybe take some practice or some attentiveness. But you can start to feel a cloud of the sensations in the body that are sort of interconnected. They're not delineated like, oh, that's my feet, that's my chest. It's much more like you can't really find the boundary anymore, and you don't need a visual image of the body or a body map. It's just sort of a cloud of sensation, internal sensation in the body. And then you can gently scan that with your attention, gently. You're not trying to push anything or force anything. You're actually just noticing. So you kind of notice if there's any part of that feels sort of left out. Are you noticing the upper half of your body and not the bottom half? Are you noticing your legs and feet and hands, but not your head? I'm going to just kind of scan a bit and see if that, you can kind of open that entire space. And this can take practice. It may not come immediately. But once you do, recognize that space is interconnected without boundary. It might feel like it's fluctuating like a wave. It could be like a sine wave. It could be vibrating like a bunch of centers that are all interconnected. You might experience it differently than other people, but it's important to recognize when it feels like discrete centers and when it starts to feel all unified as one sense, one physical sensation, without an image of the body and the mind, without any sense of a boundary or a purpose or a meaning or anything tied to it or a label, just that cloud of direct sensation. Then again, you can even more gently let it be what it is, let it come to you, let it come to itself, let it self-express that sensation. And even more gently, just start to, out of curiosity, not probing or intention or forcefulness, just out of curiosity, start to investigate the nature of that cloud in direct experience, not in description. So does it feel like it has a boundary? Feel, not visual image, the feel of it. Does it have a boundary like the body wall, or does it sort of just flow out kind of in the general vicinity of where the body is, or where you think the body is? You might just start to sense some blurred edges. Again, this really is best approached from a place of relaxation, of surrender to the experience, of a dilated, relaxed attention, and a natural curiosity. This is much easier after you've had some sort of an awakening to the sense of pure consciousness or pure I am or pure I. That's usually the first step. And then beyond that, it gets much easier to experience this direct experience. If you haven't, it's still possible, but it's very easy to conceptualize this stuff. What I'm talking about is not conceptual at all. If you're making thoughts or conclusions about it, that's fine, but that's not what I'm pointing to. This is very direct, without a lot of mental interruption, without a lot of analysis or mapping, just the direct knowing of the experience as an experience, just as it is. And you just allow your attention to rest there. Start to notice the blurred lines that could be a body wall if you imagine a body overlying it, but without the imaginary body wall, without the label, skin, edge of my leg, bottom of my feet, without those labels. It starts to become very, very porous, the edges, very vague, but very, very alive. At some point, you just sort of notice how this dilation of attention and the dilation of the sense itself just starts to fill up all of experience. Even if there's a bit of tightness in the body somewhere, it doesn't contract attention back down. It's just sort of absorbed into the whole. It's noticed, but the dilated attention can still maintain complete, all-encompassing sense awareness, which means awareness and sensory, vivid sensory phenomenon as one. So this sense fills up the universe. This body sense, without a body, without calling it a body, without looking at an individual image of body walls or boundaries or labels. It's very similar to the sound cloud in that it's not locatable. It has no clear substance, without labels. It has no designation, actually, but it's vividly alive. Very obvious, very scintillating, very present, closer than close. And then depending on how things are going for you, you may start to notice that even that boundary between the sound and the body sensation doesn't exist. Without a thought, without a belief, without a label, without a distinction, which is cognitive in nature, there's no boundary. Sound, sensation, sensation, sound. The body feels the sounds in the room. The sounds experience the body as all of awareness, completely interpenetrated. So that's sort of the progression. It can happen over months or a year of practice, or it can happen instantaneously. There's no rules to this. But when you sit, I would say that's a reasonable progression. Don't force anything. Just allow it to demonstrate itself, because it is already the case. You know, what drops is the labels and the movement of thought. That's what drops out or stops becoming so important, stops getting so much attention. And then the all-encompassing nature of sense phenomenon just demonstrates itself. So, and then I want to address some subtle nuances about the body sensation that I think can make it experientially different from sound. So one thing I want to do is make a distinction between physical touch type sensation, which like in medicine would be called somatic sensation, and sort of internal, more vaguely located, usually less intense sensations that I might call visceral. In medically, they would be called visceral sensations. Visceral sensations, by definition, are more vaguely located, less distinct as far as where it is, but it's still in a body region typically, so you might feel it in the chest or the gut. A somatic sensation would be like if somebody were to place the fingertip on your skin without looking, you could tell within a centimeter of where they're touching you. It's very distinctly located. So when we are exploring these sensations, don't leave either one of those out. So in the same way that I kind of explored and scanned the body and then looked for edges and all that, the same way you want to make sure you're not leaving anything out. So the feet touching the floor directly, that fullness, that is more of a somatic sensation. It's very, very located specifically. You can tell which part of the bottom of your foot, if you wanted to, is feeling it. It has a little bit of a different quality, and a visceral sensation is just sometimes very subtle. But for reasons I'll get into in a minute, it's actually very important not to overlook these, and also to recognize once you recognize both these types of sensation, it's very important to start to let them overlap, bleed into one another, not be so distinct from one another. And that I'm not sure if I'm going to get into in this video, but as far as why it's important to recognize these visceral sensations, that is because they tend to correspond to emotion states. I'm not going to go into great detail on emotion right now, but the way it's experienced at this level, the way emotions are experienced at this level is a visceral sensation in a body center that's associated with a certain movement of mind, interpretation, story. And these are partially habituated through human interaction, and then they're also personalized through your own experience and your history. So I won't go into which part's real, which part's not, and that sort of thing, because as far as I'm concerned, if it's indirect experience, it's significant. So I wouldn't say, you need to get rid of one of those aspects, but just recognize that's typically how an emotion is experienced at this stage. There's a body center, and that is linked to an interpretation, or it's linked to a label. First, it's actually linked to a very subtle sense of yes or no. I like it or I don't. And then the next sort of stage is the label for it. What is it? And then the next stage is the story of how it came about, what's causing it, how to get it, and then getting into solutions of how to fix it, etc. All of those are abandoning the body, of course. The more we get entangled in the thoughts and stories, etc., we're sort of abandoning the body aspect, the visceral aspect, the body center of it. So what I would say is don't ignore either one, really. Recognize them as what they are. Recognize the thought labels, the interpretations as what they are, thought, consciousness. Recognize the body center as what it is. And I think over time, what you'll find, this is for you to investigate, but I would think you'd probably find this. I think most people do that. Over time, the interpretation part calms down a lot. The mind part. There are times when it's helpful to explore those as well at that level, but over time, attention is going to naturally fall into the body centers, into the visceral part of that. That's really the core of the emotion. That's the if you want to call it a core wound, or the root is in the physicality of the body, and it tends to be that visceral type of sensation, not so much a localized one where it's like, oh, that's right in my thigh, or I can feel it in my left foot. It's much more like it's a vague sensation in the chest or belly or throat. Intense emotions tend to locate themselves in specific areas, like panic can often be like in the throat or neck, sadness in the chest, anxiety, sometimes in the gut, sometimes in the head. So they don't have to be any specific place. It can be different for everybody, and there can be more than one component. But when we tend to feel intense emotions, if you're really clear on this direct body sense, and you really allow attention to rest in there, you'll see that the sensations aren't incredibly intense necessarily, but they're linked to very often very intense interpretations. And that makes the whole mechanism feel can make it feel very overwhelming. So that's why it's very helpful to practice this when you're not feeling triggered, or when there's not an intense emotion state, and recognize that there is an ability to just sort of saturate yourself into an all-encompassing sensation, so that when there is some density, contraction, intense emotion state, or intense interpretations, we start to recognize that that's also possible. And over time, it becomes quite spontaneous, actually. It starts to feel very healing, very sort of self-nurturing, to allow attention to move into these visceral centers. And then I think over time, that even evolves until it's all so interpenetrated, it's hard to even pick out the consciousness from the sensation in the body, from the sounds in the room. It's very, very interpenetrated, and in a sense, you could just say it dissipates almost immediately because there's so much presence. You're not running from it. It's actually the opposite. It's not an escape mechanism. You're escaping into everything. You're escaping into everythingness, into all-encompassing vividness, until the sense of separation just evaporates. So hopefully this was helpful, at least as far as giving you an experiential way of approaching this, and then talking about these emotion centers, and recognizing when, there might be times when you sit to practice this way, and the sound comes very easily, the all-encompassing, boundless, without dividing line, sound experience, filling up experience. There is no other. There is no outside. All-encompassing, completely penetrated, saturated, very, very real, very alive sound experience, without labels, without any labels. And then you move attention to the body, and you notice it's all of a sudden really hard to do that with the body in this moment. It's usually there's some center that is sort of charged, maybe an emotion state, something that's going on in your life. But recognizing that and then approaching it sort of in a systematic way, starting with just scanning the body, seeing what's being experienced, what's felt, and what's the quality of it. Is it a dull sensation? Is it sharp and intense? Is it demanding that you pay attention to a certain storyline or an interpretation? If that is the case, give it its due. Put some attention in that consciousness, in that thought/consciousness continuum. Just let it churn. Move into the oceanic nature of consciousness and the thoughts forming. Let it all be okay. Don't make any of it wrong. Give it some time if it needs to move there, if attention wants to move there. And then you might notice it'll, over time, relax, might drop back into the body sensations. And that center that was attributed to the storyline or the interpretation might be a little more relaxed. It might be a little more interpenetrated with the other sensations in the body. So it's just a matter of exploration and acceptance and trusting what's going on, trusting your experience as directly as possible, and slowing down so you see and feel sensation as sensation, sound as sound, thought as thought, consciousness as consciousness. And it's kind of a paradox, but once you've really practiced and gotten good at this receptivity where it becomes much more effortless, then the sound being distinct and then the body sensation being distinct and the consciousness being distinct, the paradox is that's when they genuinely start to interpenetrate, when it starts to become impossible actually to tell the difference between sound and sensation and color and consciousness. Just one flowing into the other with no subject, no object, just complete aliveness, fluctuating, no outside, no remainder. So I hope this was helpful. Let me know in comments if it's unclear or if you wanted some other aspect of this elucidated or explored, or if you want more videos like this. I'm happy to make more. Thanks. I hope this was helpful.